This module covers the front ends and the back ends and the IT infrastructure. So there really are two perspectives. One is the one that's being showed on the slide from the application developers, which see the front end is really where the tablets, the smartphones, where the devices that are really hosting the applications, the mobile apps as an example. When they talk about the back ends, they talk about the entire data center as really the back end. So it's an interesting perspective that is not the traditional one where the IT systems and network staff have held, where the back end is really the data storage and the front end is the web servers as an example, or the data servers. So an interesting perspective, differences in perspective between application developers and IT systems and network staff. And it's important in this changing environment where more things are going towards mobile that we understand this difference in perspective, and in the design process that we make sure that we account for it as well. Now let's talk a little bit about what we find on the front end, the servers. By a simple definition of that you see on the screen, a computer which serves information is really the definition of a server. It can be used interchangeably between hardware or also as a service. The difference is in the context and the discussion of what is actually taking place there. So in some cases, it's discussed as a network asset. In other cases, it's discussed as a service being provided by the IT infrastructure. Specialization is definitely increasing. Web servers, database servers, and file servers are the typical ones that we've seen occurring over the past 10, 20 years. But that specialization is getting to the point where there's really more one server per role. Sometimes you do see situations where you see many roles in one device, but that's typically found in very small IT shops. The rule is typically one role per server. Organizational and operational requirements are really what drive these differences. And mobile will continue the trend towards specialization, where you see more servers that perform a specific function. Another conversation to have about the front end is load balancing, where you see traffic and resource management taking place, both for outbound traffic and for the internal distribution of traffic inside of the network. Consider it like a traffic police, where the maintenance is really the principal reason for why you want to do load balancing, at least the more typical reason, so that you can take down a server and not affect the traffic on the rest of the network and the services that are being provided there. So load balancing is an important part of the IT infrastructure, and more important as we move towards mobile services. Another aspect of the front end is the DMZ, very well known as a designation of two firewalls, typically is how it's configured. One that is outward facing to the internet, and the other one inward facing toward protecting the network. And in between, sandwiched in between the two firewalls, is where you see the web servers that are communicating outbound to the internet, but also getting some traffic in some cases from the inside of the network, inside your network. Good rule of thumb: if it doesn't need access to the internet, don't put it in the DMZ. Now, shifting to the back end, for large enterprises, what we see in terms of the typical association of storage is something called the storage area network, or SAN. Very complex, expensive. SANs are entire systems unto themselves, which require a lot of planning, a lot of administration, monitoring, and maintenance to properly operate. And that's why you typically see it in the larger IT enterprises, not the smaller ones. Very scalable, manageable, simple to add, remove storage space. Security controls do exist to protect data on shared hardware, and that's very important. Also, network attached storage, typically less expensive, less complex. It operates as an extension to servers. It really meant for sharing files across a network. The application server sees the NAS as just another file server, so that's a typical configuration as seen there in that little diagram, where you see the network attached storage, the clients, the local area network, and the servers. Also very scalable, manageable, but for smaller IT operations. Simple to add, remove, reassign storage, space by clustering. Security controls also do exist. And as we see more of the move towards adding video, adding images coming from mobile devices, you'll see more of these kinds of devices, both NAS and SAN, in your back end. So, summary, there are two views to what is the definition of a front end and a back end. We need to define some of the components in the front and back end of the IT infrastructure, like the storage area networks on the back end, like the DMZ, which isolates the network, the local area network from the internet. And a typical the point for why we want to talk about this is that mobile is changing this. More specialization, more need for storage, particularly when it comes to storing video and images.